Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it normally runs for about 3 hours. Tonight, we're probably just going to go for about an hour. Uh, it's a long story. I will tell you guys next week, but lots of changes are on the horizon for me personally. So uh, anyways, yes, so it's been a very long day. So if you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. And let's see. Oh, I knew. Sorry, my brain is all over the place. If you want to be notified when I go live, then you can type the word, all one word, Dana Live to the number 22999. And you will get a text message of when I go live. Jack is here. JJ is here. Hello, welcome. How is everybody doing tonight? Embers, Kenneth. Hello, hello. So, yes, I am live streaming from my bedroom. Every surface has stuff stacked up all over. So I apologize for this overly casual live stream this evening. Uh, I just didn't even think about it until about 5 minutes ago. Oh, wow. No, there's no surface that's cleared off. So Butterfly is here. Shannon, Blue Moon. JJ says, I really appreciate the text. Kenneth says, Dana, I sent you an email about an hour ago. Okay, good deal, Kenneth. I will be on the lookout for it. I'm trying to get in the habit um, of checking my email for live stream questions and comments and all of that an hour before, or not an hour, a day before. So if if you have any questions, you can text them to me or you can email them to me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com, and I will try to answer them on the show. So Kenneth, I will check yours and get back to you next week if that's okay. Ember says, I had a fab EMDR session today, trying to clear triggers of just seeing my ex's handwriting. Writing a slam poem also helped clear the trigger as well. Very cool. I'm excited for you. That's awesome. I'm so excited to learn more about EMDR. I'm going through a certification program. What is it? The 4th and the 5th. So when is that? Today's Wednesday is the 2nd. Friday, is it? Friday and Saturday, I guess. So yeah, I am excited to learn all about that. I would be curious to know what things that you guys found helpful in kind of throughout your healing journey with all of this. Some people really find EMDR helpful, some people not so much. Any other books or therapies or uh, yeah, I would just be curious to know kind of what helped you. Colleen, oh, thanks, says, Hi, Dana. I just wanted to say thanks for still being here after 3 years. It is the anniversary of my discard. As much healing as I have done, I'm finding I'm revisiting some things from that time. Yes, I am glad to still be able to do this after 3 years. I think it's closer to 5 actually, but I'm Yeah, I'm glad that you were able to find us. And um, how are you doing with these kind of new pain that seems to be surfacing? Thank you, Jonathan, for the live stream donation. He says, recovering swiftly. Hashtag stay strong survivors. Jack says, dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, without reservation or question. What what about that, Jack, did you find so helpful? I agree. I think it's a wonderful program and a skill set that I wish was taught at a yet starting at a much younger age. When you went through DBT, did you go through it with a practitioner, like a one-on-one with a therapist, or was it in a group setting? Or okay, Blue Ninja says definitely EMDR, but it had to be the right therapist. The first person I went to was no help, but my current one is really helping so much. Okay. If you don't mind me asking, I'd be curious to know what was it about the first therapist that you found not helpful, and what is it about the second therapist that you do find helpful? Shannon mentions the book about verbal abuse was my first introduction to Patricia. Yeah, Patricia Evans is who Shannon's referring to, who's the author of The Verbally Abusive Relationship, which is a fantastic book, just game changing. And I highly recommend that. I just love that book so much because it really talks about more of the, I don't want to say this is a covert, but more of the quote unquote mild forms of abuse that often get missed or dismissed by others, such as kind of invalidation, minimization, shaming, blaming, stonewalling, withdrawing, these kinds of behaviors. And so for, you guys know my thoughts on it. Even if a person doesn't come from a dysfunctional family, they come from a dysfunctional society. And there's all different kinds of messages that we need to unpack if we're going to, or I should say, unpack and replace if we're going to move forward and live a, a healthy, well-adjusted life. And this book really helps because most books that talk about abuse talk about it in more of the extreme forms of like physical abuse or extreme emotional or verbal abuse. To me, that kind of stuff is it's the slow pitch, right? Hopefully, um, yeah, I would say most people can kind of see that stuff. Maybe not so much if they're in the relationship, but they can at least see it when it's happening to other people. So there's some degree of awareness that it's a problem. The parts of verbal abuse that Patricia discusses, uh, I think most people have difficulty seeing as the problem that they are. And it's just fantastic. Okay, so let me scroll up and Jonathan says, yeah, the quiet abuse is the worst. Yeah, it really is. It does damage in so many ways that can go unaddressed and um, yeah, and unhealed for decades. Joel says, hi Dana, I found that narcissists compromise with creativity or suppress creativity, question mark, that they miss value in creativity because they focus on other things. I found that doing creative things helped. Narcissists definitely tend to, well, I shouldn't say definitely tend to. They have such a fragile self-image that they have a hard time celebrating the strengths of others, the strengths or the victories of others. And one of the ways that that comes out is kind of this suppression of individuality, suppression of creativity, suppression of the strengths of others. So for those being around a narcissist, if you're different from them in ways that they don't approve of or that they find threatening, they definitely try to stomp that out in a person. And of course, that can be very damaging. Oh, well, thanks, Colleen. She says, as for books, yours really helped me at the time. It made all the difference. Well, thank you. Thank you. And I think you had said before the book was the Out of the Fog book. Ember says another book is the You Are a Badass: How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. It's a funny and empowering book. Very cool. Jack says, Dana, yes, one on one with a DBT focused therapist. I hit a dead end with CBT focused therapist for almost 35 years. CBT alone was not enough. Yes. And that makes absolute sense on so many different levels. One of the primary um, I guess kind of like modes or understandings or treatment plans with regards to addressing unprocessed trauma is to first sort out kind of where, what the trauma is, and then what are the traumatic responses that followed as defenses. And a lot of times, like behavioral uh, kind of acting out or emotional dysregulation, um, these kinds of things, uh, that needs to be resolved. Like the initial trauma needs to be addressed, identified, validated, and resolved. And then working on the results of that, which tends to be kind of that mindfulness and that self-examination of uh, that emotional reactivity, um, and all of the other skills that go along with DBT is absolutely huge before a person can then move on to CBT, because CBT has a lot to do with kind of breaking patterns, um, uh, pattern interrupts, like this kind of stuff, and that can be very minimizing and invalidating and damaging if it's done right out of the gate, because then that person is not they're not dealing with the trauma and the trauma response that's going on. So the way I look at it is CBT is more of a top-down approach, whereas DBT is more of a bottom-up approach, where DBT is addressing stuff that's that's gone on for a while. Because if that stuff isn't, and it can be difficult, and different approaches kind of work for different people, but yeah, kind of getting a solid foundation in place is, I think, gonna set a person up for success. Absolutely. I'm so glad that that worked for you. Okay. Kenneth says, my grandmother has my abusive family member living with her. She says he's abusive, but talking to him or reporting him will make it worse. Anything else you can think of to do? Do you know how he's abusive? Is it verbally? Is it physically? Is it financially? I guess kind of what I'm getting at is I'm curious to know, um, if how difficult it would be to have kind of a case opened. I really think I would encourage you to call the like adult, um, oh, what is the word I'm looking for? It's like social services, but adult um, protective agency. It's like child protective services, but for adults, especially elderly adults who are often exploited and victimized. And in situations like this, you can generally file a report anonymously. And I would let them know that she's afraid of kind of what you said. She says that he's abusive, but talking to him or reporting him will only make it worse. And that if they do interview her, to please interview her away from him, and um, that she needs help, that this is a really damaging situation. Let me Google something real quick. Let's see if I can get a number for you. Okay. Well, it's going to depend on the state that you live in. But if you do a Google search for adult protective services and then your state, you'll be able to pull up that number and talk to somebody. Um, yes, it might make it worse, but at the same time, the state also has the authority to step in and put an end to it. So allowing it to continue, especially if talking to him isn't, if talking to him doesn't help, then the only and of course it's not, right? Because obviously he sees his behavior as fine because he continues to do it and he's not motivated to stop doing it. So if a person's not motivated to change their behavior, then generally it requires some sort of outside influence to get them to stop, which may mean separating them. Um, Yeah. Other than that, I would encourage you to kind of safety plan with your grandmother. And I would if and when you do contact Adult Protective Services, you can ask them about that. What can't ask them? What can I do to help? I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And you know, what can I do? Can I safety plan with you for her? So some of the things that you might be able to do, just kind of depending on the situation and what's going on. If he's financially like exploiting her or kind of taking her money, like these kinds of things, um, just mooching off of her, these kinds of things, then potentially starting another bank account where she can start putting money in there. Um, y- you know, just doing a full out safety plan. It's just going to depend on the situation and kind of what um, if there's kind of what kind of abuse is going on as far as what that safety plan is going to entail. Yeah. Uh, Shannon's talking about the verbally abusive relationship with Patricia Evans. She says the examples were so relatable. Yes, and helpful. I love that book on so many different levels. If you guys are not familiar with the book that we're talking about, I encourage you can go to my website, thriveafterabuse.com, look under book club, and you can see my notes on the book. I highly recommend that you read the book. Um, but I just did a quick list of some of the forms of verbal abuse that she mentions in the book. So it's very eye opening. So I kind of along the lines, I've been meaning to do this for a while, but as I watch just random videos or things online, I keep thinking, man, I really need to make a folder where I just save little snippets of videos or save things that I see that are great examples of this kind of stuff in motion. And I came across a video. One of my new favorite YouTube videos to watch is called BuzzFeed Unsolved, and it's supernatural. And so it's these two hosts. they have a great rapport, and they go ghost hunting to all these different places, and they also kind of do this like true crime series thing. Anyways, one of the episodes, the one host was was trying to listen to something, and the other host was talking, like they were in their ghost hunting thing, and he shushed him. And so the guy was talking, and the other guy says shh, like that. And I was so proud of the other host, Shane said, he said, "You just shushed me." He said something along the lines of, that that was really inappropriate. That was very dismissive. And he was able to beautifully articulate exactly why that was inappropriate. And it was such a great example of kind of a mild thing, but it was still inappropriate. And it was dismissive, and it was uh, it not appropriate, you know? And he asserted himself, he handled it appropriately. And uh, and then it was it's smoothed over, and they went about their ghost hunting thing. It just was a great example of how assertiveness can work, even when somebody who maybe is well intended and that you have a great rapport with crosses a line. Just thought it was a great example caught in the wild. Jack says, I really needed the wise mind paradigm to start connecting the rational and emotional mind that CBT does not talk about. I read David Burns' Feeling Good years ago. Not enough. Yes. Yes. I would be curious. Have you read anything having to do with uh, polyvagal theory? What's his name? Porges is his last name. Porges, I think. I would be curious to know your thoughts about that, because it addresses his theory. Stephen Porges. He addresses the kind of the concept of the rational and emotional mind, but he also addresses the the importance and um, the role of the vagus nerve stimulation when it comes to trauma, and um, kind of the body component with that, and shifting out of uh, kind of either that reptilian or mammalian system into more. I don't know. It's fascinating. He's very spot on. Wonderful. Colleen says, I think the most valuable lesson recently was to let go of the narcissist label. It has really allowed me to see things more objectively and not all through the prism of the label. Yes. I think that definitely is a stage in healing and understanding, and it's a very important stage. It's probably one of my biggest regrets with the all of my earlier videos that I put out is that I didn't hammer home that point enough. And um, it is true. It's very significant to uh, narcissists kind of spotting that really overt, kind of blatant, uh, you know, red zone behavior of like a narcissist or a sociopath or that kind of stuff. That the upside is that it can give a lot of validation to a person, but then the downside is that uh, their their radar is kind of set to scan just for that little sliver of society, when in reality, like you're saying, it's a much larger continuum of problematic behavior. And that is, it's so significant because that's an once we're able to see problematic behavior for what it is on that full range and learn how to respond to it appropriately, then that's when our lives really radically begin to change. I think, as a matter of fact, I would even go so far as to say this is one of the main reasons that so many people continue to stay in abusive relationships, or stay or continue to date abusive people, is because they're on that lookout for, in their mind, they've linked up, okay, if this person's a narcissist or a sociopath, it's a problem, but anything else is somehow workable. And the reality is that's definitely not the case. And then they're also looking for somebody who is problematic, just like the way that their ex was, or the other problematic person in their life was. And the reality is people are all different, and problematic behavior takes many different forms. And and so because of that, obviously it opens up a person, like if they're only aware of problematic behavior on that little sliver of what it looks like, they're missing the rest of it. So, yep, that's well said, Jack. He says, "Okay, Kenneth, not to speak for Dana, but in my experience, it's really hard to help people that are, one, not you, and two, aren't living with you in your house." I agree completely, especially with number one. If they're not you, it's, man, it really goes back to knowing, okay, what do we have control over and what do we not have control over? And really embracing that. And so, and it can be very difficult in situations like this where you might have a loved one who's being abused, and trying to navigate that line. Like, where is that line? What do I have control over? What don't I have control over with this? And you do have control over that. You can call Adult Protective Services, that you can help her with safety planning if she's interested. You could see about opening up another bank account that this guy doesn't know about. Uh, like these kinds of things. So you can help kind of advocate for her and be there with her. Uh, but at the end of the day, if she's not, you know, um, wanting to move forward with anything, or um, we can't change him and we can't change her, but we can try to step in, realizing that she's probably scared and maybe even dependent on him in some ways. um, and so, but our power with that is limited, and that's very difficult. Yeah, Jonathan is saying, yes, the abuse you can't see, that quiet behind closed doors. Yes. And sometimes it's even out in the open, and people just justify it. Oh, this person had a bad day, they had a bad week, they had a bad childhood, they, um, they haven't had enough coffee, they have had too much coffee, you name it. It's easy to justify stuff. Even with that example that I gave you from that one BuzzFeed video, I thought to myself, I don't know if I would have even caught that. Like, there's still certain behaviors that fly under the radar for me, that I just am used to kind of dismissing and glossing over. So it's it's amazing. It's amazing. It's so much more helpful to have the more milder forms of invalidation or um, emotional or verbal abuse pointed out and seen in motion. Because, I mean, even with outrageously overt stuff, it's amazing the stuff that people justify, either to themselves, or they justify the behavior of a friend or somebody else. Okay, Ember's Oh, UNA is here. Says, hey, did I miss a specific topic? I wouldn't want to respond off topic. Oh, we're all over the place tonight. Just hop on in. Hop on in. You're no worries about responding off topic. In case you haven't noticed, UNA, this chat is consistently off topic all the time. It never ceases to amaze me. We'll be talking about something, and then I'll go over to the chat, and people are talking about a recipe for chili or something. I mean, it's like it's all over the place. So just hop on in. Embers says Blue Ninja and I both were in the same wellness DBT group, and our therapist had no empathy or reflective listening. We both have the same EMDR doctor now and encourages the tears and feeling. That's wonderful and very thank you for sharing that with me. That is a um, yeah, that empathy and reflective listening both are very, very important. I think at the end of the day, um, people need to feel safe. When you have especially traumatized people, they need to feel safe. And getting a person who's traumatized, kind of back to the whole polyvagal theory that we were talking about from Stephen Porges. It is Stephen Porges, right? I gotta look that up. Hold on a second. Yes. Yes, it is. Stephen Porges. Um, with the whole polyvagal theory is a big part of trauma is being able for our bodies, our really when we're talking about that, we're talking about that vagus nerve, which connects from the base of our brain stem all the way down to our rectum, and it touches pretty much every single organ in between. And it's what connects that mind and body. And so when we go into fight or flight, that's activated through the vagus nerve. And so there's this connection there. Uh, so that importance of safety. So helping a person to shift out of fight or flight and into that rest and digest stage, you're activating two different um, systems in their body. So you have that the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight, and then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest and digest. And there's lots of different ways across the board, from mild to major, to that need to be there in order for a person to start to feel safe. And that's very, very important. So a person could be, really highly trained, highly skilled, all of that, but if they're not able to, uh, if their verbal language and their nonverbal language is not able to convey that sense of safety and that sense of calm, then that person, the traumatized person, is going to remain activated. So there's um, kind of this co-regulation that is very helpful when working with people in trauma. That it's sort of the kind of the philosophy that there only can be um, um, so much crisis between two people at one time, because it can just feed off of each other, and it builds and it builds and it builds. So one person has to really be the anchor with that. And the benefit is, so for a trauma therapist, being that anchor, knowing that I need to be the anchor for this person and this is what that entails, is going to help bring that other person back into that safe place, that rest and digest state of being. So that co-regulation is a big part of it. The example I've given before is with the dog whisperer. If you guys remember that show, where he would have this dog. The owners would call, oh, this dog has terrible separation anxiety. He's really anxious. He destroys everything. His dog's just out of control. And one of the first things that um, Caesar Milan would do is he would go run the dog. He'd go get his rollerblades on and he would go exercise that dog hard. So he would get out all of that energy to help complete that emotional, um, kind of that wave of emotion. So kind of burning off all that energy, and then he would bring that dog into, well, he'd work with them to get some sort of training to establish, like, "Hey, I am the pack leader." And then for that for a dog, that was very helpful. And then the dog was able to kind of relax and be like, "Okay, I don't need to have all the answers. I don't need to figure it out. This other person is the pack leader." And then he would take them to his to join the pack of the other dogs he had who had already gone through his process, who were already kind of emotionally regulated. And so this hyper aroused dog was able to go into that environment and and um, having this role modeled for him, that kind of appropriate behavior, as well as kind of what just a very functional, well-adjusted group. And you know, that's the way to do it. And people aren't so different from that. Um, Marcus says, we'll say I have PTSD and borderline personality disorder. Just wanted to say thank you for your videos. Helped me to figure out my mother is a narcissist, maybe obsessive compulsive personality disorder. I got into therapy and DBT. Every day gets better. Well, that's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. Yay. Yay, you. Every day gets better. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing to say, and a beautiful way to be. Well, thank you. All that Kaz for the live stream donation. She says, "Thank you, Dana, for your amazing channel and this group that definitely saved my sanity 2 years ago and probably saved my life." That makes that makes my heart smile. I'm so glad we were able to be there and to do that for you. That means a lot. And yeah, I think it's the power of community, just knowing that you're not alone, and hearing the validation and the clarity and the lessons learned from other people is just really helpful. Yeah, I would agree. Jameson is talking to Kenneth and says, "You've got to report that guy and tell the police your grandmother's afraid. Bullies threaten all the time, but they need to be cut off." Yeah, and that's the beauty of adult protective services, is they can kind of be the bad guy in the situation. So, and they'll monitor just like child protective services. So, if they think something's going on, if there's reports, then they can continue to do welfare checks, they can continue to check in on the situation, they can mandate things. So, um, it's not just a one and done kind of thing. But yes, I would encourage you to call them, and at a minimum, at least talk to them and share your concerns, because I think every single situation is like that. Every single person who is being abused or seeing somebody else be abused feels that exact same way. If I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, if I talk to them, nothing changes, but I don't think having the it's that feeling of powerlessness. If there's nothing that I can do, and if I let other people know, then it's just gonna make it worse. So they should be no stranger to that, and hopefully they'll be able to help and step in. Okay, let's see. Shannon says, "Your book clubs really helped too. When are you doing them again?" Soon, I hope. Yes, soon is the plan. Yeah, I've got some stuff in progress. I will tell you guys next week. all about it. And um, yeah, then we will get going on them. I miss them too. I miss the conversations from that. Let's see. Jack is responding to Marcus. Let me scroll up here. Oh, okay. Was the one that was saying that he has PTSD and BPD, but that every day is getting better. And Jack is saying, let's go down. He says, I know CPTSD is a thing for me, but lately I feel like I'm in BPD mode now. And my wife tends to agree. Would you feel comfortable explaining that a little bit more, Jack? What does that mean for you to be in BPD mode now? Bricks and Feathers says, what worked well for me was a trauma therapist for growing up in a dysfunctional family with a personality disordered parent. Yeah. Craig says, why is the sound so low? Oh, it is because I am on my laptop and because everything is a mess right now, but it will be better next week. So I do apologize. Oh, how funny. Lucid Earth says, I was just about to watch How to Stop Feeling Guilty for Leaving an Abusive Ex, and then I saw that you're live. Thank God. You are strong, you are powerful, you are beautiful. Yes, well, welcome. And for anybody else that is kind of found their way here tonight, um, these live streams, I try to do them every Wednesday night. They normally go for about 3 hours. Tonight, I'm not gonna go for very much longer, um, because there's a lot of stuff going on. And normally I don't do a live stream from my bed. So just know it's not normally this overly casual like this. There is just it's like a bomb went off in here. I'm uh, sifting and sorting and organizing, and yeah, it's a hot mess. But if you're interested in knowing when I go live, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999, and you can get a text alert when I go live. You can also text me questions to that number after you subscribe to it. I think because it's a message thing, you have to keep them reasonably short or it'll cut you off. But you can also email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com, and I will answer your question on a following live stream. Um, let's see. Let me scroll. Oh boy, Craig is saying, "Oh, the sound." He's like, "I can't hear a thing. My volume is almost all the way up." Well, Craig, I would encourage you. This will be out on podcast form tomorrow. So with significantly better sound. Uh, so I don't know if you guys know that. I did have a podcast. A lot of these, well, I said the vast majority of these live streams are turned into podcasts. You can find the podcast at any uh, podcast site out there, iTunes, Spotify, um, SoundCloud, any of those places. So it's just Thrive After Abuse. So the name of, I know, real original, right? It's the name of the website. It's the name of the YouTube channel. It's the name of the podcast. And uh, yeah, so it's those podcasts are cleaned up. It's a lot of the ums and ahs and pauses are cut out, and the volume we do the best we can to get it to where it is, it sounds decent. Let's see. Let me scroll down. Huffle Mom, thank you. And thank you, Jack, for um, letting people know to how to tag me in the chat so I can see their question, as well as just reminding them of all the different ways that they can text and do all that stuff. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Okay, Butch says, so if you're new here, where do you suggest that a person should start? Fantastic question. I would encourage you to I would go to whatever audiobook service that you use, if you're an audiobook person, and I would start with my book that's called Start Here, and my name is Dana Morningstar. So I would start with that book. That gives you an overview of all of the, the terminology, definitions, frequently asked questions. It's just it's literally the book that I hand people like, "Oh, you're new here? Hi, welcome. Here you go. Like, read this. Let's start here and then kind of catch you up to speed with kind of what may or may not be going on. It'll give you some clarity and validation, and then we can go from there." My second book is called Out of the Fog, and that takes the concepts, many of which that are addressed in the first book, and compares and contrasts them to the kind of their functional counterparts. It also addresses a lot of disempowering and damaging dysfunctional messages and just kind of untangles that. So, and then my third book is The Narcissist's Playbook. Um, the first part of that book is kind of all about manipulation, various forms of manipulation, uh, everything you've ever wanted to know about manipulation, different types of manipulators, you name it. The last half of that book is all about basically how to um, kind of gain the self-awareness and do some of that deeper dive personality examination to examine the traits and vulnerabilities that are very frequently exploited by manipulative people, and how to spot that in yourself and how to work on changing that. I have found the good news is I have found that the vast majority of people, once they have this level of awareness of, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't realize that um, kind of being quote unquote go with the flow was a problem, or that, because most people, when they've been manipulated, they don't really quite know exactly how it happened. And because of that, it can really feel like a fluke. And hopefully it was just a one-time thing, but for many people it's not. It continues multiple times throughout their life because these skills aren't taught. And everybody here, myself included, have all learned the hard way. So that's what I would recommend. If you're an audiobook person, starting there. If not, you ebook is an option. You can, um, if you're not an Audible member, or if you don't do um, audiobook subscriptions, you can call your local library and see if they'll order those books for audiobook, and then there's no cost for you. So that's another option. And Embers asks, uh, did you get a chance to check out the highly effective CPT technique for PTSD? This American Life podcast did a great report on it. My counselor hadn't heard of it either. No, I didn't. And it's on my list of things to do. And this week has been absolutely, absolutely wild. But I will. I'm very excited to learn more about that because I have never heard of it. And I'm all about Um, yeah, trying to figure out what works and let's do more of that, you know? Okay. Kenneth is saying, with the guy that's living with his grandmother, it's mostly verbal. It's stuff like raising his voice and being passive aggressive. Okay. So if you do end up calling Adult Protective Services, I would let them know that and I would frame it in a way that uh, basically that's intimidating behavior is what that is. And that alone is it's very manipulative. So, yeah, I would share your concerns with them. Let's see. Let me scroll. This is so much more difficult on my laptop when I just have the little mouse pad. Not I don't have the mouse, I just have the scroll pad. That's a great question. Circus asks, "Is it common for those recovering from narciss" Oh my gosh, no, I just lost it. The suspense, huh? I started on this great question, and then then I touch my mouse pad and I lose it. Hold on. Ah, yeah, yeah. Let me find it. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay, he asks, "Is it common for those recovering from narcissistic abuse syndrome to get together? And if so, are they happy, real, and content?" Not without doing not without doing the work that being in a happy, real, and content relationship requires. When you have so that skill set, which is significant, which includes emotional availability, which includes open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication, uh, effective communication. um, I mean, the solid understanding of boundaries, assertiveness, assertive communication, knowing where your boundaries are, and knowing how to assert yourself when they have been crossed. And being able to identify your wants, your needs, these kinds of things, just being very grounded within yourself, knowing how, basically being able to be grounded in yourself and being able to express yourself in a tactful, um, appropriate, moderated, like emotionally moderate way. Again, these skills are not taught. So, kind of the upside is for people that have been through narcissistic abuse and that are learning a lot of these skills here, in many ways, they have a real leg up on the average couple who's never experienced any type of abuse. So, uh, there's, but everybody's at different places in their healing and understanding. Um, so it's not just having this in common of, oh, this person was experienced narcissistic abuse, and oh, I experienced narcissistic abuse, therefore we're automatically just going to make for a good couple, because that's not the case. And I had somebody ask me a while ago if, kind of, if you could have a relationship with two people with codependency in a relationship, and if that would work out really well. And I think what they were getting at was codependency in the sense of, um, this extensive people pleasing and this kind of go with the flow attitude and this kind of hyper degree of empathy and, um, people pleasing kind of behavior. And the reality is that no, whenever there's such an imbalance at present, either to codependency or to narcissism, you're going to have major issues in that relationship because both of those are so imbalanced. Um, and they both tend to lack all of that criteria that I mentioned before about the need for effective effective communication, assertive communication, um, really being grounded within yourself, all of that stuff. So it's doing the work that is required to get that skill set in place. That's what makes for a functional relationship. So basically, in short, learning functional ways of relating to other people and learning functional ways of relating to ourselves. But both people have to have that. This is having that functional behavior is a prerequisite for a functional relationship. This isn't to say that we're looking for perfection or that a person has to be fully healed in order for them to start dating. I I fully believe this and I've experienced it firsthand. There's only so much healing that we can do on our own. And I'm not saying that a person needs to date in order to be fully healed. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that if a person ever does want to be in a relationship again, to realize that are certain issues that are just going to lie, there's certain unhealed wounds, let's put it that way, that are going to lie dormant until you're in a relationship. So when anybody really gets into a relationship, that's when a lot of these unhealed wounds become activated. And this is also another reason as to why people that are not in a relationship with a person don't see certain types of their behavior. It's only those closest to them that um, experience this. So, at a minimum, so like I said, we're not looking for perfection, but ideally, we are looking for somebody who's dedicated to personal growth because that level of accountability and introspection is vital. It's vital. If you are with a person who does not value personal growth, they think it's silly, stupid, unnecessary. There is no insight into their behavior. There is no accountability. You have a bunch of immature communication skills. They get defensive, they blame, they shame, they deny, they project, they, um, you know, doing a bunch of that kind of stuff. It's not workable because it's not solutions oriented. It's just crazy making. So, um, yeah. So I hope that answers your question. Really, communication. That again, let me kind of elaborate a little bit more on that. With narcissistic abuse in particular, and if you have a person that's dedicated to personal growth, a good example of that are the moderators here in the chat. We have Huffle Mom and Jack. They're married, and they've been through a rough time of it in different ways, and in many different ways. But the one uh, I shouldn't say just the one, there's probably many, but one significant trait that they share is they're both very dedicated to personal growth. And that's huge. That'll carry a couple very, very far. So, um, yeah, it's learning what effective communication is and how you feel. So many survivors of narcissistic abuse really struggle with truly being honest with themselves and um, knowing how they feel on just even mild things, knowing when uh, when their feelings are hurt, knowing when they're frustrated, knowing when their um, boundaries have been crossed. It's amazing the stuff that people get used to dismissing and glossing over, and they've been doing this for decades, and so it can be a little challenging to start getting real with yourself um, and not dismissing that stuff. Okay, let me scroll down here. Yeah, I'll be curious. Bricks and Feather says, yeah, I'll be interested in what you think about EMDR, Dana. I've heard both good and not so good things. My former therapist doesn't recommend it for childhood trauma, only adult trauma, PTSD. That's interesting. I would be curious to know why. I think one of the challenges too with childhood trauma is it can depend on the age of the trauma. And um, one of the challenges with therapy in general is kind of knowing whose memories are whose. And so for children, it can be, uh, they might be told certain things, that certain events happened or that certain people were were mean or abusive, and that child may not have that so that memory or that experience is not their own. It's just what they were told. And so there can be kind of this level of unintentionally implanting false memories. And then that kind of opens up a whole nother can of worms. But I would be curious to know why kind of what your therapist's reasons are for that. Blue Ninja says the first therapist didn't ask me to talk about any subject out loud and asked me a few questions to answer aloud. The second EMDR lets me talk, asks questions, never pushes harder than I can go while constantly tapping. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. Let me scroll here. Um, scroll, scroll, scroll. Ember says, yes, Dana, I've read about Porges's polyvagal theory, and it makes so much sense. There's a physical series of body movements that clears the adrenaline punch. I'll try to find it for you. Yeah, I would be interested in that. So thank you. Oh, good. Lori says, oh yeah, and I did listen to the video and watched on codependency that you told me about. It spoke to me hugely. Was this the Pia Melody video series? If so, did you get a kick out of her big 80s hair and her shoulder pads? Kind of a blast from the past, huh? Has seeing that. She's been doing this stuff forever, and she is just a wealth of information. Those older videos of hers are fun to watch. Shakira asks, after abuse, do you feel like you need to be alone forever now? Yes. And so what you're describing, that's a very common trauma response. So when we feel unsafe, our one of the very common responses is to withdraw from society, is to withdraw from other people, is just to kind of keep to ourselves because on maybe on a less conscious level, so we might not even be aware of it, but it's that feeling of, well, I know that I'm safe and I just don't know if anybody else, I don't know who else is safe. Actually, Stephen Porges, the guy that we're talking about, had a great example of this, kind of this withdrawing that tends to happen after abuse, after trauma of any kind, but especially after abuse, where it's like your brain, if you were to think about the security agents, the TSA agents at the airport, and how they screen everybody, right? You've got to walk through that thing. You've got to take off your shoes, take off your jacket, you've got to go through this whole process. Got to stand in that little machine, get x-rayed, get patted down, on and on. And they're screening for terrorists, right? So when we've experienced the trauma, it's like our brain turns into TSA agents and they're screening every single person we meet, fearful that they might hurt us as well, that they might be a terrorist. And uh, that's kind of, it's part of this hypervigilant response when we've had something really deeply painful happen. It's our brain's way of trying to keep us safe. And uh, there's things, a lot of things that we can do to where, to kind of work with that response to where we can trust again and we can feel comfortable leaving our home and we can engage with other people and a lot of that returning to that feeling of safety, because that's really what it involves, has to do with um, in large part, learning how to keep yourself safe. So, and there's a wide variety of ways that we can do that. So learning uh, about boundaries, and it's a lot. It's a deep dive into that. Um, my book, that the third book that I was mentioning, the Narcissist's Playbook, which you can find on audiobook, ebook, paperback, you name it. At a minimum, it's that last half of the book on kind of protecting yourself from manipulation and examining personality traits that are frequently exploited. Um, just kind of all of that, regaining your power, basically, is that last half of that book. I highly recommend reading that. And so also engaging in communities like this, where um, you're talking about it, you're being validated, you're being heard, and y- just there's, I think, a lot of healing in having other people kind of be witness to your experience, to realize that you're not alone and you're not crazy. And the way that you feel is very normal given a very abnormal situation, which is abuse. So I would be worried about you. I think everybody else would too, if you were to have experienced significant abuse and just didn't miss a beat and were optimistic and cheerful and high energy and just kind of bouncing around and ready to take on the day. That would be very strange. And I would be very concerned. So the way that you feel is appropriate given what happened to you. So now the next step is, okay, now we need to help return to safety. And uh, yeah, it's a multifaceted approach, really being very intentional about what you're feeding your brain, um, in terms of, well, kind of across the board, but uh, you know, making a point to not watch too many things that are stressful. So, um, I would say limit your intake on news or y- uh, y- not watching shows that are upsetting or stressful. Um, Let me see, what are some other point there's some guided meditations and things like that on YouTube that are fantastic. That can be a good way to go to sleep and just unwind. The learning to trust again. I really do think, Stephen Porges talks about this, and part of his theory is that it a lot of healing has to take place in community, um, more so face to face, because that's kind of how human beings um, interpret information about who's safe and who's not. And so it's that engagement with other people that helps us to return to that feeling of safety. Of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic and this stuff is all online. So it's a, you know, it, different, strange new place in time. But even with online communities, I think a lot of healing can happen with that, as it's it's a relatively it's a relatively safe place. So, every now and again we get trolls in here, people try to stir things up, or um, you know, you just kind of get it's a mixed bag. It's the general public, you get some stuff in here that's a problem, but more often than not, within the support group and um, chats like this, we have moderators in here. We try to keep things as safe as we possibly can. And so just for people knowing that they're not alone and being able to communicate with other survivors is really huge. So, and there's lots of support groups. I always encourage people to join more than one, just because every group is a little different, and just having that wide mix of people, and it's just, I think the more connection the better. So I encourage you to do a search for different support groups and to join a few. Mine is currently, I have a support group on Facebook. It's called Thrive After Abuse. I just FYI, if you do decide to join it, of course it's free, but there's the Facebook page and then there's the Facebook group. You want to join the group. The group is closed, whereas the page is open, so people can see what you're posting on the page. So if you don't want that, then just make sure to join the group. Yes, Jennifer, they're probably very spot on with that. So she was saying, I know my vagus nerve has always been out of whack because I pass out cold whenever I get blood taken. Not when I get shots, though. So maybe that happens because of childhood trauma. Sorry, I got in mid sentence. So I think that what was being talked about. Yes, we're all over the place tonight with topics as usual. But yes, there is very much potential for a connection there. So dissociative states, uh, including um, emotionally dissociating and then flat out physically dissociating, where you're just fainting, can be a vagal response. Uh, and it can also have something to do if you're, holding your breath, or other types of stress response that happens if you're getting blood taken. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. Let's see. Rick Colombo says, so many faults, so little time. You've got your histrionics and BPDs, et cetera, et cetera. I wonder if I should just never give anyone the benefit of the doubt. Let's unpack this statement here. So, first off, I guess I wouldn't ever advise giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. I think that's terrible advice. And that's kind of one of my beefs with a lot of um, the process with learning to trust again. That I think this is very dangerous advice where it's sort of like, oh, well, you need to just somehow trust like you've never been hurt before, or love like you've never been hurt before, or err on the side of goodness, or most people are well intended and therefore you should give them the benefit of the doubt. I disagree with that. The reality is, we I I think it's more reasonable and appropriate to have a more neutral stance. So the reality is, when we meet people, we don't know. We don't know anything about them except for the very limited information that we have to go off of. And that's okay. And so I think having that limited uh, perspective and remaining neutral, you know, is appropriate. So as they share information, as we share information, we're going to be paying attention to that. How do they respond to the information that we're sharing with them? And in particular, like, are they able to keep secrets? Are they able to, you know, how do they respond to our vulnerabilities, to our pain, to our anger, to our frustration? How do they handle their own vulnerabilities, pain, anger, frustration? What is their level of communication? All of these things. So the only way, I guess what I'm trying to get at, the only way that we can really tell if a person is emotionally safe is through being aware of how they handle these things. So emotional safety isn't something that's just we just stumble across. Like, oh, here's this great person who just is going to always, who's normal, decent, well-adjusted person who's going to treat me appropriately all the time. That that does not happen. Um, and it will never happen because it doesn't exist. It's that emotional safety is developed. It's developed during those kind of awkward, tense times. It's developed through being assertive. It's developed through boundaries. It's developed through honest conversations. All of that stuff is very difficult. It's difficult and it's awkward and uncomfortable to do, you know. So if we're with somebody who handles that well, if we say, "Oh gosh, I've got something to tell you. I'm afraid of the dark, and I don't like going to movie theaters because I'm afraid of the dark." If they laugh at that, if they tease you, if they keep pushing you, if they start kind of shaming you or belittling you, or they won't, in other words, they're not respecting your boundary, the message is then they're okay. They're not emotionally safe in this way. And um, just real quick, thank you, Colleen, for the live stream donation. She says, Dana, just a little thank you for your help and care. I appreciate that. The uh, learning how to cultivate a functional, healthy, nourishing relationship is huge, 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 huge. In terms of histrionic, kind of cluster B, what used to be considered cluster B personality disorders, histrionic, BPD, etc. I think it can be helpful to view it in terms of it's not good or bad. There's a lot of people on YouTube that, um, frankly, they think they understand personality disorders and they don't. So demonizing mental illness in general, especially uh, uh, histrionic or BPD, that kind of stuff, it's it just um, I don't know, it's missing the picture. The reality is there's a wide range of just kind of neurodiversity out there, and that whole continuum, it covers a lot of ground. And of the personality types that are the most problematic antisocial personality disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder. Most personality disorders in general, especially cluster B personality disorders, more likely than not, that's more of a it's thought to be more of like a trauma response. Um, Borderline personality well, I guess that I could go on and on about all that, but um, just because a person uh, might be on the spectrum of histrionic or borderline doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It doesn't mean that they're malicious or dangerous. It means that they have, more likely than not, some unaddressed childhood, some unaddressed trauma. With borderline personality disorder in particular, it has a lot to do with an anxious style of attachment. And, um, anyways, regardless, there's so many different ways that people can have problematic behavior. So many different ways. It is by far not just limited to uh, personality disorders. Now, this isn't to minimize those that have been, uh, victimized by people that are histrionic or borderline personality disorder. I just don't want to take a broad brush and just kind of demonize it because I guarantee you there's a lot of survivors who are most likely have borderline personality disorder. So, um, yeah. And it really bothers me when I see in a lot of these videos that being demonized. I think it's an unnecessary kind of secondhand re-victimization that occurs. Yeah. So I guess with that said, Rick, go slow, know yourself, be grounded in yourself, have a solid understanding of your boundaries as much as you possibly can. I think it's always an evolving process of learning to kind of get to know ourselves and to be able to be ourselves. We've all encountered all kinds of garbage messages over the years about what we should and shouldn't be or do or have or whatnot. So, um, getting comfortable with yourself so you can be yourself, basically, and um, finding other people in your life in all capacities, as friends, in relationships, and as coworkers, whatnot, that are at that same level of emotional maturity and that um, yeah, emotional maturity and self-awareness, and that's huge. Oh, well, thank you, Kenneth. I appreciate that. Thank you for the live stream donation. He says, I feel like I owe 90% of my progress in recovering to you. Thank you for not only helping keep myself safe, but improve my own behavior. Please let me know if there's anything I can do for your channel. Oh, well, I really appreciate that. I will definitely let you know. And d- just, that makes my heart smile to know that I've been able to make such a positive difference in your life. Like that's awesome. The power of the internet just never ceases to amaze me. That's just so cool. Let's see. Let me scroll here. I also wanted to mention about self-awareness and insight and accountability and communication and that whole concept of a person doesn't have to be perfect or completely healed or completely, at the finish line in order to be a good partner. So much of it is just that self-awareness and being able to communicate that to the other. So, for example, um, and this is where kind of compassion and empathy, and I think emotional maturity really come into play, is seeing is having these conversations with your partner. So, um, if they let's say if they have an anxious style of attachment. Well, I'll give you an example in my own life, okay? So, the person that I've been dating, I would say has an anxious style of attachment. I tend to be more on the avoidant side. Both of our attachment styles are responses to trauma, but we don't pick our attachment style. It's just something, it's like a default. We just kind of default into them. And because I tend to be more on the avoidant side of the spectrum, uh, um, I don't need the level of reassurance that he often needs. I tend to be kind of fiercely independent, more of a lone wolf. Um, there's certain things communicating uh, that probably would probably be considered normal behavior in a relationship of just kind of communicating where you're going to go, what you're up to, these kinds of things does not even cross my mind. And so because of that, there's been multiple times where he interprets my behavior as a lack of interest or in him or that he did something wrong, and it's that anxiety spiral that just goes overboard. He wants to know, did I do something wrong? And he gets really scared of um, if I say, like, last night I was feeling really frustrated, and I said, you know what, I'm just really frustrated and I just need to be alone. Like, it has nothing to do with you whatsoever. I just I'm in a mood and I just need to do something. I just need to be alone and I need to have it pass, and I'm just going to watch my my shows on YouTube or whatever, and I'm going to go to bed. And his mind, and that was, and I forget, and there's times I forget where, even though I'm very straightforward about how I'm feeling and kind of where we stand, because he's anxious, he still doesn't believe that. And so his mind just goes to this really, it's a very difficult place for him when he gets there. And um anyways, the point of this is, so we both have some very real things that we're still working on and still working through. And but so we're, you know, I think we're healed enough to where we can be in a functional, nourishing relationship. And what has made our relationship, I think, so good and so functional and nourishing is that level of communication and really trying to see where the other person's coming from, and not defending our own stance on things. So there's that ability where, he really struggles with this anxious style of attachment. He's well aware of it. He knows that it can be, um, you know, it can be difficult for me because I'm more on that avoidance side. I know it must be a very difficult way for him to live. I cannot even imagine. Um, with just that chronic fear of abandonment. And but we're able to talk about these things when they happen. And that makes all the difference. And so every time there has been things that have happened where one of us gets activated, and um, which is going to happen when you have a person that's more on the anxious side of the spectrum and you a person that's more on the avoidant side of the spectrum. Because for those of us that are more on that avoidant side of the spectrum, uh, relationships can be nice, but it can also really register as like a loss of freedom. And um, I don't know. I need a lot of my alone time, and um, and so that kind of need for that chronic, or that ongoing validation and reassurance, it it can be a bit much at times for me. But I also understand kind of I understand where he's coming from. I understand what's going on with him, and he understands it as well. And he's avidly um, working on addressing that. And we're both working towards becoming more of that securely attached. We're probably still always have some degree of I'll probably always have some degree of avoidance in my attachment style. He'll probably always have some degree of that anxious there. But, you um, yeah. So I hope that helped just to kind of see that and how that plays out in real life. Uh, UNA says we should do a chat about the polyvagal theory. It's interesting. We should. I wonder if I could get Stephen Porges on and we could do a chat with him. I would love to interview him. Yes. Hugh says, "Hi, Dana. Regarding emotional trauma and neuroscience, neural mapping definitely has proven to show abnormal brain activity in those that have been abused." Yes. Yes, this is true. So whenever there is trauma present, there is trauma affects the brain because trauma isn't just the event, it's the processing event of that event. So in terms of but I think it's helpful to take away kind of the judgment associated with the word abnormal. So abnormal doesn't necessarily mean bad. It just means it's different. There's different brain activity that's going on. And a lot of times that different brain activity that's occurring, it's occurring for a reason. And it, a trauma response kicks off of a wide variety of defense mechanisms, all of which are designed to protect us. So um, it's the body's way of trying to stay safe and returning. Kind of the goal in healing from that trauma is to be able to do kind of this reprogramming to develop more I don't know what you would call that, like workable or um, yeah, I guess like workable maps, neural maps of how of processing that pain. So it's not so limiting in a person's life. And there's a wide variety of therapies that can really work with that. So I guess if these concepts of abnormal or um, brain changes with trauma, this kind of stuff, please, that can be overwhelming and that can be intimidating and terrifying. But I would just encourage you to view it as um, take away that it's not good or bad, it just is, and it's there. Those responses are there for a reason, and there's things that can be done to 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 help soften those fight or flight responses so that person can go to that rest or digest state so it can change that whole um, kind of neuro mind body, really mind body response. Angela asks, have you heard of nonviolent communication and Marshall Rosenberg's book, Nonviolent Communication? I'm wondering if it is powerful enough for dealing with covert narcissism. I'd love to hear what you think. I have never heard of this book. I'm going to put it in my browser so I can look into it and then I will let you know. again, going based off of very limited information here because I'm not familiar with the book, all I can tell you is in terms of communication, when anybody, let's put it this way, when anybody, ourselves included, have some sort of problematic behavior, let's say we've crossed a boundary of somebody else, maybe it was accidental. Part of that, the ability to change has to do with insight and accountability. And it can be very difficult if we unintentionally cross a line or we just aren't aware that certain things aren't okay. If we have this idea of what abuse is or what problematic behavior is, and we do something that we don't feel falls into that category, we're going to get defensive. And when defensiveness is present, connection is not. And so the only way to um, kind of kind of be a catalyst for change really is to decrease defensiveness in the other person. So if they're already on guard about their behavior and you know, they're not willing to accept your point of view about it, that it's a problem, which is a lot of times the case with more of that um, covert abuse or covert, I would even say more on the mild end of narcissism. It's presenting the problem to a person in a very, and again, it's just going to depend, like it's a spectrum. Okay. So if we're talking more on that mild end of this person is, has some behaviors that are just, I don't know, maybe kind of obnoxious or irritating or, you know, whatnot. That's one thing. If we're talking dangerous, deceitful, kind of more on that extreme side of things, the exploitative, um, you know, covertly abusive in the sense of um, they're very aware of what behavior is and isn't acceptable, and so they're more covert in the sense of they abuse the other person in such a way that other people aren't aware of it. When it's malicious and intentional like that, then it's really just time to get distance and to not stay around and try to um, diffuse that bomb. It's just going to hurt you in the process. And it's probably not going to work anyhow, frankly, because there's so much there with a person that has such deeply dysfunctional behavior that you've really got to go through like behavior by behavior by behavior and that whole process all over again, decreasing defensiveness. And I mean, it's exhausting and it's an uphill climb and it's not, I mean, would just take a significant amount of time, in my opinion. But I'll check out that book and see. Uh, Embers is saying my housemate shushes me, which is better than the shut up she spouted on my birthday. I'm gonna try that. Yo, that's inapproprio. That's cute. Yeah, I don't know if you were here when I was talking about that BuzzFeed video when one of the guys shushed the other one, and the other guy didn't miss a beat, and he just called him out on it in a very assertive way. I just was so proud of him. That was such a wonderful example of um, how to handle that situation. You know, I'm not fully sure that the other guy understood how big of a problem that was, but the fact that that guy who called it out, his name is Shane. When Shane called it out, he addressed the behavior for what it is. He said, "You shushed me." I think he said something like that was inappropriate. That was very dismissive. So he addressed the behavior and then he addressed why it was a problem. The other guy didn't really acknowledge anything. It was sort of like, "Oh, huh, okay." But the fact is Shane still asserted himself, and that was the right thing to do. And I highly at least because those guys normally have a really great rapport, my guess is the other guy, Ryan, won't do it again. Because Shane made that boundary clear, and normally they have really great boundaries and a really great rapport with each other. So I don't think Ryan meant to cross a line with him. I think it happened in that moment. He was really frustrated, and it just kind of, um, it just kind of happened. So that just a great example of somebody crossing a small boundary and somebody being assertive about it. It would have been a lot easier for Shane, potentially. I guess not really. We tend to think that it would be easier to just let stuff like that slide, but it isn't easier. It's actually harder because that's how resentment and hurt feelings and all of that stuff starts building up. So saying stuff when the boundary violations are small is, and then paying attention, does that person adjust their behavior? And then if they don't, then thinking, okay, well, then now what? So that's a problem if a person doesn't, um, they don't respect your boundaries. Uh, let's see. Sarah. Oh, okay. Sarah asks, hello, everyone. What is the best way to get over them? That's a great question. I think my 2 cents on that is I know, again, my 2 cents is only my 2 cents. Is one of the things that helped for me was to realize that there was nothing there. That what I really had to get over was the fantasy that I had in my mind of the relationship that I thought we had, which was not the reality of the relationship that was. So we tend to feel, if we feel like we've experienced a loss, I think it can be helpful to really identify what is that loss. When you realize in abusive relationships that, uh, you know, that it's kind of smoke and mirrors, that this person had such hurtful behavior that, yes, it is the loss of a relationship, but the loss of, um, this person, it's more of the loss of the fantasy that we have to grieve and that we have to mourn. The loss of who we thought they could be, the loss of the relationship we thought we had, um, realizing that who they were early on, if they were, just that love bombing, that incredible, like, romantic behavior and over the top, and we feel like we've met our soulmate, that kind of stuff. Um, but then they later change into becoming very devaluing and bitter and hateful and cruel and these kinds of things. Then realizing, not internalizing that, and recognizing that's their limits. So it's never appropriate for somebody to treat another person like that. And if you were on the receiving end of it, it's not something that you did, it's not something that you caused, it's not something that you deserved. You didn't somehow ruin the best thing that ever happened to you. That this relationship with behavior like that, frankly, it was doomed from the start. Because, like we were talking about earlier, in order for a reasonably functional relationship to be present, there needs to be emotional maturity, there needs to be effective communication, um, open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication, um, an interest in, or the ability to be accountable, sincerely accountable for their behavior. There's lots of other kind of skills needed in order to make that relationship happen. One of the exercises I encourage people um, to do is to write out a list. I call it the for when you miss him or her list. And on that list, in bullet point format, write down all of the reasons that this relationship needed to end and all of the rotten things that they've done. And write it in you really want to do this in like a bullet point format so it's easy to skim through. So when you do find yourself missing him or her, that you pick up that piece of paper and you read it, and it'll say things like, oh, they um belittled you or they called you fat at Thanksgiving. They um or they caused a scene at Thanksgiving. They um cheated with their coworker. They lie. They're chronic liars. You're writing all of this down. So it wakes you up and you realize, okay, maybe like this, yeah, this relationship had some pretty major issues. This person has some pretty major issues, and this is not for you. UNA says, Dana, I had good luck stimulating the vagus nerve to calm my heartbeat, an irregular one. Were you UNA, were you doing like vagal maneuvers to do this? Um, some of the common some of the common ones that we would use, that they use in the hospital, like in nursing, which is interesting because it's more like the medical side. You don't normally hear about this on like the emotional side for like counseling and whatnot. But like if a person comes in and they have high blood pressure, or if they have a normally it's significantly high heart rate, then you would have them do vagal maneuvers. So an example of a common one is taking a breath in, and then you're going to push down with your abdominal muscles, like you're going to poop. So describe. But then you hold your breath in. So you take your breath, and then you hold, and then you kind of push down, but then you hold your breath for 10 seconds, and then you release it all at once. So, and that stimulates, it's like a system reset. Weird, right? Like Control Alt Delete for your heart, and that'll normally drop your heart rate. There's ice water, um, splashing ice water on your face can be another. Yeah, there's a few of them. It's interesting. Okay, let me scroll down here. I'm gonna sign off here pretty soon. Um, let's see, Jack. Posted a link to the book. Let me check and I will let you know. Let's see, Jack posted a link to the polyvagal theory book by Stephen Porges in the chat, and I don't know, he was talking to Embers about it, but all I do know is that is the Stephen Porges that we were talking about. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not. Let's see. Ember says, my dad kind of collapsed last year like he was in a coma, not responding, but with eyes open, and he couldn't bend his knees. So I was trying to hold him up. The hospital said it was the vagus nerve. Interesting. How is he now? The Elvis, for example, he supposedly, well, I don't know if it's supposed, I think it's a fact, he died on the toilet. And more likely than not, my guess is what happened because, well, he was also addicted to all kinds of pills and a lot of pain pills. And pain pills cause constipation. And so, um, again, I don't know if this happened, but my guess is that this is what happened, is that if he was on the toilet, he was probably having a difficult time going to the toilet. And if he was continually straining, he was, of course, unintentionally doing all these different vagal maneuvers, which are dropping his heart rate, dropping his blood pressure, into the point where he passed out and fell over and probably hit his head or something like that. So it's weird. The stuff is no joke. I mean, it sounds kind of like, oh, I don't know if this would really work, but uh, it it definitely does. It's one of the first things that first responders do if a person is having cardiac issues and if it's appropriate for that situation. Oh, well, thanks. Liberty, Liberty. Says Dana, I fell in love with your voice. Well, well, thank you. I guess. Uh, my voice sounds weird to me, because the way we think we sound and the way we actually sound are two different things. Uh, let's see. Let me scroll, scroll, scroll. Superstar says, Dana, I feel like I'm at a pajama party with your close up. Yeah, well, you kind of are. This is this is the result of kind of poor time management and not thinking ahead. So I, yes, ended up packing up my stuff, and it's a long story. I'll tell you guys next week, but it's exciting. Embers is talking about a training, and she says, my verbally abusive parents promised to do the 12-week training with me, but they only did one. I did the whole course and loved it. Yeah, so here's kind of my take on it. So what we were talking about earlier about defensiveness, when defensiveness is present, connection is not. And really, if there's any type of change that's going to be made, a connection needs to be present. So just like some people were saying earlier with their therapists, that they didn't have that connection with them. There wasn't that rapport. That therapist they weren't doing that reflective listening. For whatever reason, there wasn't that connection present. And so we can see from those examples how that really impeded it was a complete barrier to their healing. It's the same way with anybody kind of learning anything or getting any type of new skill. especially when we're talking about people that are going to be defensive and be confronted with some of the behavior that they have that's problematic. One of the benefits is, uh, and this again, I'm just so in love with technology and it's just so exciting, is with courses and things like that. When it's pre-planned material, the benefit to that is it in many ways can decrease defensiveness because that person, the therapist or whoever's leading the course, isn't talking directly to that person. So it doesn't feel as much of a personal attack. Sort of like, "Hey, I don't know you. Here's just a video about what something is and isn't." It's very factual. It's not personal. It's not a personal attack. It's nothing. And so because of that, that person is more likely than not, I would imagine, going to be receptive to that new information and it's going to get them to think about their own behavior versus some sort of confrontation. Because again, confrontation tends to lead to defensiveness, which shuts down connection. And nothing, people aren't listening. When connection is not present, there's just, you're in a holding pattern. So, let me scroll. Uh, oh my gosh, there's lots going on in the chat. Sorry, I way behind here. Um, oh, okay. Huffle Mom says, "Hey Dana, Nita asks, does a narcissist know they are being abusive or they feel like they are being kind and unaware of the abuse? Like, do they believe that they are kind?" Thanks, Dana. I don't know if they necessarily believe that they're being kind, but they feel just more likely than not, they probably feel justified for their behavior. So, and this has to do with this is a boundary issue at the kind of at the core. So, for example, if um I'll just give the example that I always give. Let's say that you go to the store and you forget to buy ketchup. And you forget to buy bread. Let's say that. You forget to buy bread. You come home and this narcissistic person, starts yelling at you. I can't believe you forgot to buy bread. What's wrong with you? I was going to make a sandwich. I need to make my lunch for tomorrow. How could you forget to do this? Gosh, you're so stupid. You're so this, you're so that, blah, blah, blah. Right. And it can be to be on the receiving end of something like that, it can feel somewhat justified. If we're not solid in our boundaries, then we can be easily knocked off base. So we might feel, well, gosh, they're right. If I hadn't forgotten to buy the bread, if I'd only remembered to buy the bread, then they wouldn't have yelled at me. So therefore, the solution is for me to just remember to buy bread next time. I need to stop being so forgetful. I somehow deserved them lashing out at me. Okay. Um, so that's what happens when you have two people that really don't have a solid grasp of healthy boundaries. And this is how I would say pretty much every person who's ever been abused and who struggles with it emotionally of trying to figure out what happened, did they deserve it? Did they cause it? Kind of just what happened? At the core, it's a boundary issue. And again, this stuff's not taught. So these boundary issues are bound to happen when they're not taught. It's very easy for any of us to kind of get pushed off center if we if we're not grounded, you know? So, uh, okay, so on the person that's being verbally and emotionally abusive in that scenario, who's yelling at you about bread, you forgot to buy bread, right? In their mind, they're like, "Well, yeah, I'm frustrated. You went to the store, you knew I was supposed to do this." They feel very entitled and justified in lashing out at you because they're frustrated. You did something, according to them, you did something that made them frustrated and angry. Therefore, they have every right to treat you with frustration and anger. That's the boundary problem on their end. That's that sign of emotional immaturity. An emotionally mature person understands that yes, you might be frustrated and angry. You can feel how you feel. And frankly, that's understandable. If you're like, "Yeah, I was gonna get my make my lunch and, you're frustrated and you're angry, but it's not okay to lash out on another person. There's still that very appropriate and reasonable, um, expectation of you can feel however you are gonna feel, however, you still need to behave appropriately. Narcissistic people and emotionally immature people in general don't understand this. And trying to get through to them oftentimes leads to a lot of defensiveness because they don't understand that, because there's not this healthy understanding of boundaries. In their mind, well, you frustrated me, therefore I'm going to yell at you. And they don't have an appropriate understanding of accountability either. So this again, it's an emotional immaturity issue, and that leads to when a person when a person doesn't understand boundaries, where they start and stop and where another person starts and stops, and that it's the social expectation to treat other people with dignity and respect, especially when we get frustrated and angry. It's very easy to do when we get along famously with them, to treat them with dignity and respect. It's a lot harder when we disagree. And that's where emotional maturity comes in to play, of still handling a situation appropriately regardless of how we feel. So, yes. Um, so they generally and okay, so they might not see a problem with their behavior. They might acknowledge, "Oh yeah, yeah, I yelled at you, but you deserved it." The flip side to that, where they might actually think they're being kind, is if they're using quote unquote brutal honesty, which is just a nice way of them basically being a jerk. So again, this is a boundary issue. Um, if the person on the receiving end, most people don't like brutal honesty, including especially the people that are dishing it out. They can dish it all day long, but they can't take it more often than not. But they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, I value honesty. I value truth. I want to just know straight out, what's up." And no, they really don't. They really don't, because nobody really does. It's getting T-boned with a bunch of unwanted, harsh criticism is what it is. But at the end of the day, um, you have every right to not. If the person's like, "Well, hey, I'm just trying to do you a favor. I'm kind. I'm telling you this because I care." Right? I'm telling you this brutal truth. If you don't want to hear it, or if you don't agree with it, or if you just think it's unnecessarily, if it's just unhelpful, you can completely draw the line. If that's a boundary cross for you, you can say, um, I don't appreciate brutal honesty, so please stop. If they continue on, then that's more boundary violations. They don't care. They don't care about y- where your boundary is. They just want to keep their pushing kind of I don't know, their sense of what's right for you onto you. It's controlling behavior. It's inappropriate. It's kind of um, very enmeshed because there's not that understanding of where each person starts and stops. You know, nobody likes to be micromanaged. Nobody likes to be shamed. Nobody likes to be caught off guard with a bunch of brutal advice about everything that's wrong with them. So regardless of where, that's the thing with communication. It's not about in part it's about our intentions, but equally so, it's about how our communication is received by the other person. So my communication, anybody's communication, if their intentions might be really good, right? But if it's not being received as such, if it's unwanted advice, if it's unwanted, um, you know, yeah, a really unwanted advice, in short, that's obnoxious. And, um, it's okay to have an issue with that. Okay. Jack says, "Hey, Dana, Ellie asks, I've recently been encouraged to make amends and forgive abusive family members. I love my family, but I'm wary about making amends. They are very controlling and resentful." So, okay, here's my take on this is kind of making amends is only appropriate if the other person has sincere accountability and they understand what they've done wrong and they're willing to do things differently from that point forward. So an apology is there needs to be an apology there. That's that part of it. M- I'm a little hesitant with the phrase making amends. I don't know who's been encouraging you to quote unquote make amends, but if somebody has done you wrong, then part of those amends is on them, that they need to be sincerely accountable for the harm that they've done and then take the action to correct the damage that's been done. If that's not possible, then it would be a mistake to bring those people back into like your inner circle of your life because they're going to continue hurting you because they don't see anything wrong with their behavior. So, second part to that, forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about um, continually allowing to be mistreated, continuing to allow others to mistreat you. Forgiveness is it's the cliche, I know, but it's the gift you give yourself. Forgiveness is about not allowing the hurt, the hurt that happened, control your life. So we're it has nothing to you don't need thankfully, we don't need the other person to be there in order to kind of quote unquote forgive them. I really don't even like the word forgiveness because it's so misused and misunderstood and misapplied. I refer to it as just releasing anger. So, in terms of let's just take out that word forgiving abusive family members, releasing anger towards abusive family members. Do you see how different that is? So it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with the work that the grief process and the healing process that you have to go through to release that anger on your own because you've carried it for long enough and the hurtful act on their end was bad enough and you you don't deserve to continue to be hurt by that. So that's why people say that forgiveness is an act, something that you give yourself, kind of an act of compassion for yourself. So there's all kinds of platitudes. My book, Out of the Fog, addresses a lot of them. But, this kind of these platitudes of, oh, you need to forgive and forget. Or, oh, well, nobody's perfect. Um, you know, the reality is like, yes, while nobody's perfect, that doesn't somehow mean that being abused is okay. And forgiving forgiving something has nothing to do with forgetting, and the reality is you're never going to forget. So like that whole statement is just invalid because it doesn't happen. Um, it's important that we remember if somebody has done us wrong, it's important that we remember that to the point where they're accountable for it. Uh, Ideally, that they are going to be accountable for it, that they're going to give us sincere apology, and then they're going to, and a sincere apology is only as sincere as the work that's done behind it, which is behavior change. So an apology without behavior change is not an apology. It's just talk. It's just empty talk. So as far as moving forward with your family, um, yeah, you're completely being wary about moving forward and making amends with them is a completely appropriate and healthy response. So, um, yeah, I guess I would also be when I read this statement, knowing what you said, okay, they're just controlling, resentful people. People are talking to you about making amends with them. It almost sounds to me like people are saying, oh, basically, you just need to quote unquote, get over it or suck it up and realize that that's just quote unquote how they are, and continue to allow for it to happen. That's what that sounds like to me. And it also sounds like to me that you're not okay with that because they have a lot of damaging behavior. So I would encourage you to think about kind of, if you want to cultivate a new relationship with them, then it's most likely going to be carving out kind of a new path. So it's not going to. I would encourage think about not having it go back to the way that it was in terms of, um, you just somehow sucking it up and being like, okay, I'm making amends. Like, you don't have any amends to make. Right? They've been abusing you. That work is on them. There's no work for you to do in that regard. Your work is going to be to release that anger that you have towards them. But if they've harmed you, that's on that's their thing that they need to work on and be accountable for, and um, show you with appropriate respectful behavior that they value you and that they do respect your boundaries and that they won't do this again. So thinking about, okay, carving out a new middle path for your relationship with them of, um, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. It doesn't have to be we go back to the way things were with them being controlling and resentful and abusive. It doesn't have to be that you have no contact with them. It can be that you see them in a limited capacity that still allows you, um, to feel safe. So maybe instead of seeing them, I don't know, for a week over Christmas, you only see them for a day, or maybe you just go over there for the afternoon. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you have to kind of navigate that relationship in a way that allows you to still keep your boundaries, even if they don't respect your boundaries. So when things start to get tense and you realize, okay, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling resentful, I'm feeling, um, invalidated and controlled, and just my boundaries are just being steamrolled yet again, then okay, I think it's time for me to leave. Because really, why stay? There's no People spend time with each other. Like, quality time is what matters, not just length of time. So if you're spending time with your family and there's some degree of, I don't know, some quality time there, but then it gets to the point where it stops being quality time and then it's you just trying to keep your cool, then it's just time to leave. That's it. You just make your visit shorter. You you're just gonna have to, kind of adjust. So I hope that that helps. Uh, okay. Oh, I'm curious to know what I missed here. Jenny says, I find it triggering. I'm powerless. Then where's our power? Oh, I see. Okay. This is the first part of that. She says amends. That's why the 12 steps gets on my nerves. I think it's the wording. Uh, I don't like that wording either, Jenny. That's kind of the beef that I have with 12-step stuff. The I'm powerless. I think that's more geared towards, uh, I can't control my drinking or I can't control my substance use. The way they worded it is a little, yeah, disempowering, I guess. But I think that the gist of it is I'm powerless over this substance. Like I cannot try to control it. I trying to minimize it, trying to ration it, trying to think that I can have a healthy relationship with this substance is not something that I can do. So I need to just come to terms with that and then do something different. And that something different is I'm here. I'm here in an AA meeting, an NA meeting. I'm going to a therapist. I'm doing whatever I need to do in order to handle this addiction. And that's the power that you have. The power that you have is in acknowledging that I need help and that trying to control or moderate or have a healthy relationship with this thing that I'm addicted to is not working. But I agree with you. I would love to see different wording with that because I just don't think it's helpful to admit that we're powerless. Uh, 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 yeah, and that's it too. AK says, our best thinking got us there. Then that best thinking got us to a place of full blown addiction. Jesse asks, Dana, I need your advice, please. My niece is 17. She messaged apologizing today for being angry and immature after 2 weeks ago, attacking me on Facebook horribly, so unjustly. Flying monkey for my sister, aka my abuser. Well, I have to say that um, well, I think it's wonderful that she was accountable for her behavior and was able to label it appropriately as angry and immature. Have you spoken with her? Have you, um, oh, Jesse says, I just don't know how to respond. Well, I would say, I mean, really, that's up to you. How do you feel? What are your thoughts on how you would want to respond? I guess I would encourage you to start there, thinking about what you would want to have happen in that relationship and what kind of conversation. I would imagine that there's some sort of follow-up conversation that you would want to have with her. Jesse says, I don't trust. Well, I mean, that makes sense. It sounds like she really broke trust, and it was only 2 weeks ago. And so far, she hasn't done anything to restore that trust other than to apologize for her behavior. The next part of that is gonna be her having appropriate behavior and rebuilding that trust through her appropriate behavior before it would be appropriate for you to trust her. So, that's just gonna take time. And whether or not you're at that place where you're willing to even be open to that, is another story. 2 weeks is not a long time, and for her to have, attacked you so, hurtfully, yeah, it might take a little time. And it's okay for you to be like, "You know what? I'm just not like, I'm just angry and I'm hurt, and I don't know how I wanna move forward." And you don't need to respond right now, You can give yourself some time to cool down and think about it or not respond at all. It's completely up to you. Let's see, love and peace forever. Oh, forever. That's cute. Says Dana, do you think it's unhealthy to have zero activities with people in person and be isolated long term after leaving? I'm usually a loner, but after leaving the narcissist, I feel I need hobbies. Um, yes, I do think I don't know if I'd say unhealthy. It tends to be it's a trauma response. It's withdrawing. And um it's definitely that level of isolation can be problematic in a multitude of ways, but getting hobbies and kind of interacting with people in a way that you do feel safe with, it actually does. I really feel that it does help contribute to healing. So it just kind of gets that connection back in a safe way. So, pandemic stuff, it's a little different because the world is a different place, but I would encourage you to, yeah, to spend some time cultivating some hobbies, whatever that might be. I know it's easier said than done. You might really not feel like it, but uh, I would strongly encourage you to kind of step out of your comfort zone with that and make that a priority, even if it's 30 minutes a week spent on some sort of hobby, painting, knitting, uh, cooking, what have you, just re-engaging in life in a healthy, creative, playful way helps significantly. Okay, so last question, and then I gotta wrap it up. Home Cat says, "Can you love someone and not trust them at the same time?" I think it depends on your definition of love. I think it depends on your definition of love. So, do you mean do you mean love in terms of being in a relationship with this person, or do you mean loving them in a more like generalized way, as in, like love for your fellow human being? These kinds of things. I don't, in terms of like romantic love or um, um, healthy love, I guess. Well, it's a big because there's love. Okay, there's the feelings of love, and then there are the actions of love. So feelings in health, and I guess it's important to talk about making that distinction between healthy love and um, unhealed wounds. that feel like love. So healthy love is based on off of actions. It's dignity, it's respect, it's compassion, it's care, it's tenderness, it's concern, it's kindness, it's consideration, it's love. Like the cliche says, love is a verb, love is action, and it's so true. So that feeling of love, that unhinged, oh my gosh, I can't live without this person, that's not love. Love doesn't feel like that. Although, of course, movies and media and music would tell you otherwise, they're wrong. That's not love. That's more of that infatuation that tends to stem from dependency and neediness and unexamined, kind of anxious style of attachment. Of if I don't have you, then I'll die without you. That's not love. Love is the opposite of that. Love is freedom, love is tenderness, love is, you know, it has nothing to do with kind of the unhinged neediness and I'll die without you kind of a thing. So, okay. So with that said, actually, yeah, okay. Oh God, there's so many good questions tonight. Thank you guys so much for being here, for all your questions, for kind of just for everything tonight. Thank you for the moderators. I really appreciate all of your help. And as always, and if you are new here and you want to be notified when I go live, you can text the words, all one word, Dana Live, DANALIVE, to the number 22999. And you will get a text alert every time I go live. So I look forward to seeing you guys next week. And as always, just lots of love to you. You're not alone. You're not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care and have a lovely rest of your evening. Okay. Good night.